My childhood was a bit rough. I was 5 when my dad just up and left. I don't really remember much about him, but my mom Clara made sure I didn't forget. She never talked about him without bitterness, and her anger always seemed to find its way to me. She'd say I was just like him, a constant reminder of the man who abandoned her. As I grew up, this theme followed me like a shadow. Clara was harsh, to say the least. She'd yell at me to do my chores, criticizing every little thing. It felt like I could never do anything right. I'd get things like, she barely showed me any affection. I tried to tell her about my day, but it was like talking to a wall. One time I tried to hug her, and she pushed me away, snapping, "What do you want now?" After that, I stopped trying. School wasn't any better. I was the quiet kid with hand-me-down clothes, and my mom never showed up for any parent-teacher meetings. The other kids noticed, and I didn't know how to explain that my mom just didn't care. I became invisible both at school and at home. Then Mark came along. My mom remarried, and for a while things seemed okay. But when my sister Lily was born, everything changed. Suddenly I was invisible again. Lily was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, and I was just. "Kate, why can't you be more like Lily?" my mom would say, her eyes full of warmth as she looked at my sister. I tried to keep up, but I could never match Lily in her eyes. My clothes were too baggy, my hair too messy, and apparently I wasn't trying hard enough to be pretty. Mark, bless his heart, would try to step in, telling my mom I was fine the way I was. But she'd cut him off, and the conversation always ended with me feeling even smaller than before. Lily, of course, took full advantage of being the favorite. She was a master manipulator, constantly setting me up and making me look bad. One time she spilled juice all over my homework, and when Mark tried to call her out on it, she pouted and pretended to apologize. My mom naturally took her side. "Kate, can't you see she's sorry? Stop making a scene and clean this up." It was always the same Lily's word against mine, and I was always the villain in my mom's eyes. As I got older, the situation at home worsened. My teenage years were hell. Lily was blossoming into this perfect little version of everything my mom wanted, and I was. I overheard Lily mocking me one day, calling me a pig while I was trying on clothes. My mom didn't even flinch when I told her what happened. "Lily's right, Kate. Those clothes do nothing for you." It hurt. A lot. Mark, as always, tried to play peacekeeper, but his efforts were in vain. Mom had her favorites, and no amount of Mark's encouragement could fix that. I started distancing myself from them, throwing myself into my schoolwork and staying as far away from home as possible. Dating was a disaster. Whenever I brought a guy home, my mom would immediately tear me down in front of him. "Kate's not much of a looker, but she's got a good heart," I suppose she'd say. It was humiliating. Most of the guys I liked disappeared after meeting her, and the few that stuck around for a while were quickly scared off by either my mom's comments or Lily's constant sabotage. Eventually, I stopped trying. I figured I was better off not letting anyone meet my family. Fast forward to a few years later, and I'm 27. I'd managed to carve out a decent life. I had a job as an economist at a big company, and a small apartment that was all mine. Most importantly, I'd met Alex. He was funny, kind, and didn't seem to mind my awkwardness. I felt like I could finally breathe around him. One evening, Alex turned to me and said, "Kate, I think it's time we introduced each other to our families. I mean, we're serious about this, right?" That's when the panic set in. Meeting his family. Sure, I could do that. They were normal, supportive, and everything you'd want in potential in-laws. But introducing him to my family, that was a whole different ballgame. Still, I bit the bullet. I called Mark and told him about Alex. He was thrilled. "Kate, that's fantastic. When do we get to meet him?" I told him I was nervous about Mom and Lily, but Mark reassured me. "Don't you worry, I'll smooth things over." With Mark on board, we set a date. I introduced Alex to his family first, and it went great. They were warm and welcoming, and it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe things could go well when he met my family too. The day of the dinner arrived, and my anxiety was through the roof. Alex kept assuring me it would be fine, but deep down I knew a storm was brewing. And boy, was I right. When we arrived at my mom's house, she greeted Alex with warmth I hadn't seen in years. It was like she was a completely different person. Dinner was served, and suddenly everything became about Alex's career and Lily's accomplishments. Mom was laying it on thick, trying to impress Alex while completely ignoring me. It was obvious what she was doing, trying to cement a bond with Alex in hopes of gaining something from it. But the real shock came the next day. I got a call from Alex, and he sounded, "Kate, you're not going to believe this. Your mom called me." "What? How did she even get your number?" I asked, confused and a little panicked. "She found it on some papers I left at their place, but Kate, that's not the worst part. She asked me to leave you and marry Lily instead." My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was trying to get my Fiancé to marry my sister. Alex and I decided to confront my mom, but not before we had a plan. Alex suggested recording her next conversation with him, and I agreed. We set up a meeting at a cafe, with Alex wearing a wire. My heart was pounding the entire time as I watched from a distance. Sure enough, my mom laid it all out, her absurd proposal, her manipulative tactics, everything. She was completely unaware that she was being recorded. With the recording in hand, we went to confront her. When we arrived at my parents' house, my mom greeted me with a smug smile. "Too bad Alex won't be joining us anymore, right? He's chosen Lily over you." But I wasn't the same Kate she thought she could manipulate. "Actually, Alex is here," I said, stepping aside to reveal him. The look on her face was priceless. We played the recording, and as my mom's voice filled the room, the truth finally came out. "I never loved Kate," she said on the tape, her voice cold and calculating. "I married Mark for his money, nothing more." The room fell silent. Mark looked devastated, his face pale. Lily, for once, was speechless. After we played the recording and the truth came crashing down, I expected Lily to jump to our mom's defense, as she always did. But for once she stayed silent, her eyes darting between our mom and Mark. The confidence and superiority she had flaunted all these years were gone, replaced by something I never thought I'd see: fear. It seemed like for the first time she realized the foundation of her golden child status was crumbling. "Lily, did you know about this?" Mark asked quietly, his voice shaking as he stared at her. He'd been nothing but supportive to both of us growing up. Lily opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. It was like all the years of manipulation, favoritism, and deception had finally caught up with her, and she couldn't hide behind Mom anymore. My mom, however, wasn't ready to back down. She looked at me with venom in her eyes, completely unbothered by the fact that her whole scheme had just been exposed. "You really think this little stunt will change anything, Kate? You were never cut out for success. Alex was the only good thing that ever happened to you, and now he'll see who's really worth his time." I couldn't believe she was still trying to tear me down, even after everything had been laid bare. It was like nothing could penetrate her twisted sense of superiority. She truly believed that she was untouchable. Alex stepped forward. "Actually, Clara," he said, his voice steady and calm, "you're the one who's lost. You've alienated your entire family. And the truth is, I love Kate for who she is, not because of whatever twisted version of her you've been trying to sell." That seemed to hit her harder than anything. The realization that Alex had no interest in her schemes or in Lily finally seemed to sink in. She glared at me, her face contorting with rage. "You've always been a disappointment, Kate. You should have never been born," she spat. And just like that, something inside me snapped. All those years of trying to win her approval, of letting her belittle and break me down, it was like a dam had finally burst. I realized in that moment that nothing I did would ever be enough for her. No matter how much I tried, I was always going to be the scapegoat. And for the first time in my life, I looked my mom straight in the eye and said, "You're right, I'm not the daughter you wanted, and I never will be, but I'm done trying to please you. I'm done letting you control me." With that, I turned to leave, and Alex followed right behind me. Mark stayed behind, clearly devastated, but I knew he would find his way out of the toxic web my mom had spun. I didn't need to stick around for the fallout. It was no longer my burden to carry. In the weeks that followed, I found out that Mark had filed for divorce. He couldn't stay with someone who had lied to him for so many years, and I don't blame him. He deserved so much better than what my mom had put him through. As for Lily, she tried reaching out to me a few times, but I didn't respond. I needed space. Whether she was complicit in the whole scheme or just a victim of our mom's manipulation, I couldn't tell. But I wasn't ready to rebuild any kind of relationship with her, not after everything that had happened. It's been a year since the confrontation, and I can honestly say I've never felt more free. Cutting my mom and Lily out of my life was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most liberating. I've started going to therapy to work through the years of trauma and manipulation, and Alex has been by my side through it all. We're planning our wedding now, and for the first time in my life, I'm excited about the future. I'm surrounded by people who love and support me for who I am, not who they want me to be. My mom's words still haunt me sometimes, but they no longer have power over me. I've learned that family isn't always blood. It's the people who stand by you, who lift you up, and who help you become the best version of yourself. And while I'll never have the relationship I once dreamed of with my mom, I've built a new kind of family with Alex, his parents, and the friends who have stuck by me through thick and thin. Our wedding day is approaching fast, and I'm filled with a mix of emotions. I'm sad that Mark won't be walking me down the aisle, but I understand that he's still healing from his own wounds. We've kept in touch, and he's doing better. He's found a small apartment and is focusing on rebuilding his life. Lily won't be there either. I made the decision to not invite her. It wasn't easy, but I realized that I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that she would change. Maybe one day, when we've both had time to grow, we'll reconnect. But for now, I need to focus on myself. As the wedding approached, I had resolved to enjoy every moment and finally leave my painful past behind. The venue was beautifully decorated, with soft fairy lights twinkling around us and the sound of a string quartet playing in the background. Alex was beaming, surrounded by his family, and I couldn't have felt more grateful for this new chapter of my life. I had invited Mark despite the complexities of our relationship. He'd risked, but I wasn't sure he would come. Our last conversation was filled with so much sadness that I wouldn't have blamed him if he stayed away. Yet part of me still hoped he'd be there, not just as a gesture of support, but because despite everything, I still saw him as the father figure I'd always known. As I stood outside the bridal suite, ready to walk down the aisle, a knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Mark standing there in his suit, holding a small bouquet of wild flowers. His eyes were teary, but he had a soft smile on his face. "Are you ready, Kate?" he asked, his voice full of emotion. I was speechless for a moment, and then the tears came. I threw my arms around him. It was a moment I never thought would happen, a moment of forgiveness and understanding without a single word spoken. We didn't need to talk about the past anymore. We both knew it was behind us. As Mark and I made our way toward the ceremony, I heard a faint commotion near the entrance. My heart dropped when I saw Lily standing there, looking out of place in a simple dress, her eyes wide and filled with regret. She wasn't invited, and part of me wanted to ask her to leave, but something in her expression stopped. She looked different, fragile, like someone who had spent the past year reevaluating her entire life. Alex saw my hesitation and whispered, "It's your call, Kate. Whatever you want to do, I'm with you." Lily slowly approached, and before I could say anything she spoke. "Kate, I know I don't deserve to be here. I know I hurt you and that I was part of Mom's manipulation for too long, but I'm here because I can't live with the person I've become. I'm trying to change. I just wanted to tell you that." I stood there caught between anger and sympathy. There was so much pain between us, but I could see that Lily was trying, really trying to make amends. For the first time I didn't see the golden child or the manipulator. I saw my sister, someone who had also been a victim of our mother's toxic control. "I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were," I said, my voice trembling. "But I'm willing to give you a chance, just one." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "That's more than I deserve, thank you." With Mark on one arm and Alex waiting for me at the end of the aisle, I walked toward the future I had fought so hard to build. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the scent of roses and lavender. It felt surreal, a stark contrast to the stormy, chaotic past I was finally letting go of. As we reached the altar, I glanced back at Lily standing quietly at the back. She looked relieved, maybe even grateful. I realized in that moment that while our relationship would never be perfect, I had taken the first step toward healing, not just for me, but for her as well. Mark kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Kate," before handing me over to Alex. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered love, something I had yearned for my entire life. When Alex and I exchanged our vows, it felt like the weight of the past was finally lifting. His words were filled with love, kindness, and promises of a future where I could be my true self, free from the shadows of my childhood. "I love you for who you are, Kate," he said, "not for what anyone else thinks you should be. And I promise to stand by your side, no matter what. We are building something new together." When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath. "You've shown me what it means to be truly loved," I said, my voice steady. "And with you I'm finally learning to love myself." After the ceremony, as the sun set and the party moved into full swing, I found a quiet moment alone. I slipped outside where the garden was lit up with hundreds of tiny lights twinkling like stars. The night felt peaceful, and for the first time in a long time so did I. As I stood there, I pulled out a small envelope I had been holding on to for months. Inside was a letter I had written to my mother but never sent. It was full of the things I had wanted to say for years, the hurt, the betrayal, the longing for her approval that would never come. But today I didn't need it anymore. I lit a small flame and watched as the letter burned, the smoke curling into the night sky. It was my final goodbye to the past, my way of letting go of the pain and stepping into the future I deserved. When I went back inside, I felt lighter, freer, and as I joined Alex on the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family, I realized that I had finally found my happy ending, not because of a wedding or a perfect life, but because I had chosen to live for myself, to love myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. That's the end of my story. I'm still working on building a better life, but I'm getting there one day at a time. And as for Lily, we are taking things slow. Healing takes time, but I've learned that sometimes the hardest part is just letting go of the past.